Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everyone together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances of Krishna Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our morning Bhagavatam class. This morning we will be discussing on Canto 1, Chapter 9, verse 34. And the class will be given by His Grace Balabhadra Bhattacharya Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances of Krishna Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Maria, accept my obeisances, all glories to Srila
Jai.
Prabhupada.
I'm going to have Priksha take over a few minutes because I'm getting a call from the office. I don't know why. I apologize, Prabhu.
Okay, no problem. It's always a pleasure to have your association, Preacher Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So likewise, Hare Krishna. Accept my humble obeisances.
Accept my obeisances, Prabhu.
So it's all yours. You've been introduced already, so you can go.
Thank you, Prabhu. I may give it back to you, but I'll go ahead and start. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Haribo, 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 Tora Haribo. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Hari Bhagavatam Astotarisat Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Jai Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa. Paribhajagacharya Astotarisat Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki Jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai, Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prem se Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Go Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Sri Radha Krishna Gopinatha Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham ki Jai, Navadip Dham ki Jai, Mayapur Dham ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki Jai, Shishi Goni Thai ki Jai, Shishi Radha Sarad Bihari ki Jai, Shishi Radha Madan Mohani ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ganga Mai ki Jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai, Sankirtan Jagat ki Jai, Transcendental Book Distribution ki Jai, Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, text number 34. Yudi Taraga Rajo Vidur Ravishvak Kachalulitas. I'm doing it wrong. Let's see. Yudi Taraga Rajo Vidum Ravishvak. Yudi Taraga Rajo Vidum Raviswak Kachalulita Shramavarya Lankritasye Mamanisita Saraya Vidiyamana Twachi Vilasat Pavaches to Krishna Atma. So Vishnu Gudapu, can you chant that slope for me? I'm sort of getting it twisted a little bit. Vishnu Gudapu.
I'll probably get it twisted too. Not an easy one. Yudhi Turagora Jovidhum Ravishvak Kacha Lulita Shram Vavara Alankatasye Mama Nishita Sharayar Vibhitat Mana Tvachi Vilasat Kavachestu Krishna Atma.
Very beautiful. Very nice. Pariksha, you want to try?
Okay. Vidituraga Rajo Vidumhara Vishva Kajalulita Sam Shrama Varyatyalang Kritashi Mama Nishita Sare Vidi Vibidyatmana Vachi Vilasat Kavachestu Krishna Atma.
Very nice. Gita, Mataji, you want to try?
Yudhi Duragarajo Vidhum Vishwat Kachalulita Shramavary Alankratse Mama Nishita Sharer Vipita Yamana Tvachi Vilasat Kavachestu Krishna Atma.
Nice. Anyone else?
Yudi Turag Rajo Vidumra Vishvak Kachalulita Shramavadi Alankritasye Mama Nishita Shader Vibi Yamana Vachi Vilasat Kavache Stu Krishna Atma. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Boo. Anyone else? Okay. Word for word. Judy on the battlefield. Turaga, horses. Raja, dust. Vidumra, turned an ashen color. Vishwak, waving. Kacha, hair. Lulita, scattered. Shamavari, perspiration. Alankrita, decorated with. Asye, unto the face. Mama, my. Nishita, sharp. Sharai, by the arrows. Vibi Yamana, pierced by. Twachi, in the skin. Vilasat, enjoying pleasure. Kavache, protecting armor. Astu, let there be. Krishna, unto Sri Krishna, Atma, mind. Such a beautiful phrase. Krishna Matir Astu. Prabhupada says that phrase one time. Translation. On the battlefield, where Sri Krishna attended Arjuna out of friendship, the flowing hair of Lord Krishna turned ashen due to the dust raised by the hooves of the horses. And because of his labor, beads of sweat wetted his face. All these decorations, intensified by the wounds dealt by my sharp arrows, were enjoyed by him. Let my mind thus go unto Sri Krishna. Purport. The Lord is the absolute form of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. As such, transcendental loving service to the Lord in one of the five principal relations, namely Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya, i.e., neutrality, servitorship, fraternity, parental affection, and conjugal love, is graciously accepted by the Lord when offered to the Lord in genuine love and affection. Sri Bhishmadeva is a great devotee of the Lord in the relation of servitorship. Thus, his throwing of sharp arrows at the transcendental body of the Lord is as good as the worship of another devotee who throws soft roses upon him. It appears that Bhishmadeva is repenting the actions he committed against the person of the Lord. But factually, the Lord's body was not at all pained due to his transcendental existence. His body is not matter. Both he himself and his body are complete spiritual identity. Spirit is never pierced, burnt, dried, moistened, etc. This is vividly explained in the Bhagavad Gita. So also it is stated in the Skanda Purana. It is said there that spirit is always uncontaminated and indestructible. It cannot be distressed, nor can it be dried up. When Lord Vishnu in his incarnation appears before us, he seems to be like one of the conditioned souls, materially encaged, just to bewilder the asuras, or the non-believers, who are always alert to kill the Lord. Even from the very beginning of his appearance, Kamsa wanted to kill Krishna, and Ravana wanted to kill Rama, because foolishly they were unaware of the fact that the Lord is never killed, so the spirit is never annihilated. Therefore, Bhishma Deva's piercing of the body of Lord Krishna is a sort of bewildering problem for the non-devotee atheist. But those who are devotees or liberated souls are not bewildered. Bhishma Deva appreciated the all-merciful attitude of the Lord because he did not leave Arjuna alone. Although he was disturbed by the sharpened arrows of Bhishma Deva, nor was he reluctant to come before Bhishma's deathbed, even though he was ill-treated by him on the battlefield. Bhishma's repentance and the Lord's merciful attitude are both unique in this picture. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, a great acharya and devotee in the humor of conjugal love with the Lord, remarks very saliently in this regard. He says that the wounds created on the body of the Lord by the sharpened arrows of Bhishma Deva were as pleasing to the Lord as the biting of a fiancé who bites the Lord's body. Directed. Let me read that again. He says that the wounds created on the body of the Lord by the sharpened arrows of Bhishma Deva were as pleasing to the Lord as the biting of a fiancé who bites the Lord's body, directed by a strong desire, strong sense of sex desire. Such biting by the opposite sex is never taken as a sign of enmity, even if there is a wound on the body. Therefore, the fighting as an exchange of transcendental pleasure between the Lord and his pure devotee, Sri Bhishma Deva, was not at all mundane. Besides that, since the Lord's body and the Lord are identical, there was no possibility of wounds in the absolute body. The apparent wounds caused by the sharpened arrows are misleading to the common man. The one who has a little absolute knowledge can understand the transcendental exchange in the chivalrous relation. The Lord was perfectly happy with the wounds caused by the sharpened arrows of Bhishma Deva. The word vibhiyamana is significant because the Lord's skin is not different from the Lord. Because our skin is different from our soul. In our case, the word vibhiyamana being bruised and cut would have been quite suitable. Transcendental bliss is of different varieties, and the variety of activities in the mundane world is but a perverted reflection of transcendental bliss. Because everything in the mundane world is qualitatively mundane, it is full of inebrieties. Whereas in the absolute realm, because everything is of the same absolute nature, there are varieties of enjoyment without inebriety or inebriety. The Lord enjoyed the wounds created by his great devotee Bhishma Deva, and because Bhishma Deva is a devotee in the chivalrous relation, he fixes up his mind on Krishna in that wounded condition. Om Agyanatimirandasya Jananjanan Salakaya Chakshu Militamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So this wonderful purport given by Srila Prabhupada, I will need everyone's participation and help in understanding this. As I say jokingly sometimes, it's way above my pay grade to fully understand what's being described here. And Srila Prabhupada is saying the common man, it's very difficult to understand this interaction between the Lord and Bhishma Deva. And I'm sure for most of us, it is not that easy to understand that how someone can be shooting arrows at the Lord, causing wounds. You know, you can also see the blood or whatever coming from the wounds, and that giving pleasure to the Lord. Because especially in the current religious state, philosophical state, going back centuries. People have no real understanding of God from a biblical perspective or from an Islamic perspective or whatever. They really don't have a clear understanding of God. And what to speak of these kinds of interactions with the Lord. In the Bible, you see several quote unquote interactions with God, but nothing like this, nothing as physical exchange like this, like the burning bush or the voices that they hear in the sky and all those kinds of things, but never seeing the Lord, being in his full presence in his pastimes and activities. So they are, I guess we could say, deprived of that, as Prabhupada used the word picture of the Lord. We have this picture of the Lord. Fortunately, we have these windows to the spiritual world, these paintings, and especially the ones that were guided by Srila Prabhupada, how to make these different paintings depicting the activities of the Lord. In fact, this particular pastime, you can see that painting, Krishna's holding the wheel of the chariot, Bhishma's there. It's some beautiful painting, but how can an ordinary person understand that? God is coming with a chariot wheel, Bhishma shooting the arrows, bodies being pierced. So automatically they would think the Lord must be, in this circumstance, coming in the material world. He has been affected by the material energy. Now his body is like ours. So the mundane person sees that. He thinks the Lord is like him because of seeing the physical form of the Lord or the manifestation of the Lord. But the Lord's body is always transcendental. When he descends, it's like the phrase avatar. Unlike the movie depiction of avatar, avatar means one who descends. So he just comes in his self-same form and he moves around in his self-same form. So all the attributes the Lord has in the spiritual world, in Krishna Loka, Vaikuntha, they all come, it's just him. He comes as himself. I descend as myself. It's not like there's an quote unquote incarnation, the Lord. No, the Lord Krishna comes as himself and in his self-same body. So whatever happens within that context, it is his spiritual body. I was just doing a little reading about that term, Siddha Deha, which is very nicely explained about Siddha Deha. So that is the pure spiritual body of the Lord, or our pure spiritual body as well. And it's explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 8, 229. It says, after thinking of Radha and Krishna and their pastimes for a long time, and after getting completely free from material contamination, one is transferred to the spiritual world. There, the devotee attains an opportunity to serve Radha and Krishna as one of the gopis. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments that the word Siddha Deha, perfected spiritual body, refers to a body beyond the material gross body, composed of 5 elements, and the subtle astral body, composed of mind, intelligence, and false ego. In other words, one attains a completely spiritual body, fit to render service to the transcendental couple Radha and Krishna. Sarvapadi vanir muktam tat paratena nirmalam. When one is situated in his spiritual body, which is beyond this gross and subtle material body, he is fit to serve Radha and Krishna. That body is called the Siddha Deha, transcendental body. So trying to understand the transcendental body is also not that easy because we're so accustomed to saying my body. And in the material world, that makes sense. There's the my or me, and then there's the external body and the subtle body. We're different from that body. So nicely explained in Bhagavad Gita, especially 2nd chapter. So we're traveling in this body from boyhood to youth to old age. We, and then there's the body, and then there's the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego. But in the spiritual world, here's where it becomes a little difficult to understand. In the spiritual world, there's you. And then like here it says, the Lord and his skin are not different. Here we have skin external to who we are as spirit soul. So is that the same thing in the spiritual world? We have skin, we have, organs, and we have all these separate things, or is it just us? I have to say, honestly, I'm still trying to process and understand how that is. I was asking a devotee the other day, well, if devotees are eating in the spiritual world, because they are, do they digest? Do they have stomachs? Do they have lungs? Do they have all these different organs, which are external? We know that here, these things are not us. Is that the same in the spiritual world? So this spiritual existence is beyond our comprehension at this stage. Luckily, Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas have given us a picture, a way to visualize and see it. But to say or to claim that we fully understand, intellectually, we might be able to compartmentalize these different points and say, yes, I know that. Yes, I know that. But as they say, experientially, it's hard to conceive. So this picture of Bhishma and Krishna is very difficult for the non-devotees. It's actually a challenge to see through this picture and to see the real essence, which is what Srila Prabhupada is doing so beautifully in his purport. He's giving us the essence of this activity. He's guiding us through it. So he's giving us insight through the word chivalry, the chivalrous relationship between Bhishma and Krishna. And in Srila Rupa Goswami he explains that in great detail in the Nectar Devotion. I just pulled one reference from 46 of Nectar Devotion where he talks about this. When on account of love and devotional service for the Lord, there is a special valorous enthusiasm. The resultant activities are called chivalrous. These chivalrous activities can be manifested in the acts of mock fighting, giving charity, showing mercy, and executing religious principles. By performing chivalrous activities in fighting, one is called Yuddha Vira. By charitable activities, one is called Dana Vira. By showing extraordinary mercy, one is called Daya Vira. And when one is munificent in executing religious rites, he is called Dharma Vira. In all such different chivalrous activities, Krishna is the object. So for Bhishma, shooting the arrows at Krishna, and it's giving pleasure to Krishna because Bhishma is a great devotee. Okay. It's not like, we can, we can think we're such great devotees, we can shoot arrows at the deities or something just crazy like that, no. But this is a very intimate relationship with Krishna that Bhishma has earned. And Krishna likes this reciprocation because it's done with love. And everything that we do for Krishna, everything a devotee does for Krishna has to be done with love. And then Krishna will accept whatever fruit, flower, leaf, water, whatever we offer him, he's accepting if it's done with love. So Bhishma shooting the arrows, it's hard to conceive, but he's doing it in love to give pleasure to the Lord. The Lord derives pleasure from that. Or when Mother Yashoda was binding Krishna with ropes, great pleasure. That picture, that vision gives great joy to the devotees to see that. This mother trying to bind her child. In a very small way, we can think of Bilvamangala Thakur when he was in Vrindavan as a blind person, could not see, and Krishna's bringing him milk. And then he begins to realize that this is Krishna, and I will capture him. So he's trying to capture Krishna. And at one point he did get his hands to Krishna, and then Krishna broke away. And then Bilvamangala says something to the effect that you can break away from my embrace, but you cannot break away from my heart. So devotees in their own humble way see Krishna as their child, see Krishna as their friend, see Krishna as an object of service, and see Krishna as an object of pure love. So these relationships, again, are not known to the mundane persons, and especially in the religious circles. They have no idea about these intimate relationships with the Lord. It is not portrayed in their literatures. It's not a criticism of anyone else's scriptures, just not included there. So again, we're very lucky that the acharyas have given us access to try to understand it. Now, as I said from the beginning, this is a complex set of statements and ideas in this particular purport, but there's one word that I have to say, I don't want to say troubles me, but I have not been able to understand how it's being used. And I'm hoping that between Vishnu Gada and Prikshit Prabhu and Gita and other devotees, we can try to understand this. This reminds me of years ago as a brahmachari, doing our Saturday reading session with all the brahmacharis from Sankirtan. And I remember Swabhas Prabhu was there and maybe Vaishya. We were all sitting around reading, and we came across a word. And that word was integral to understanding what Prabhupada was trying to say. And that word was tantamount. Now, most people don't normally use that word in their conversation. It's not a conversational word like tantamount. And most people don't even know what it really means. And we were sitting there not knowing what that word meant. And it was a major part of the purport. So we just, we didn't have, Google and all those things during those days. So we looked it up in the dictionary, and basically meaning this thing is equal to that thing. Like this is tantamount to that. So when we saw that explanation, we were like, wow, the purport opened up. So the word that I have a problem with is, and it's pronounced inebriety. Sometimes people say inebrities, but I've listened to the pronunciation inebrieties or inebrities or inebriety. Normally that word refers to being drunk, intoxicated. And I looked everywhere. Consistently, that's what it is defined as: intoxicated, drunk, inebriated, all those kinds of things. So I'm thinking, how is this word being used? Here it is in a statement. Because everything in the mundane world is qualitatively mundane, it is full of inebrieties. Whereas in the absolute realm, because everything is of the same absolute nature, there are varieties of enjoyment without inebriety. So if the word defined means intoxicated, drunk, inebriated, how's it being used? So again, like I said, I'm really trying to understand that. And then I looked up a little bit just to give some context. And in a talk that Srila Prabhupada was giving, a lecture in 1968, this is how he says it: young life is attractive, so that youthful age is always in the spiritual world. And as the youthful means joyful life, Anandamaya Vyasat, Vedanta Sutra, all young boys and young girls, they are after joyfulness, but they are being frustrated in this material world. That is inebriety. So let me say that again. They are being frustrated in this material world. That is inebriety, Srila Prabhupada says. The spiritual world means these things are there, but without any inebriety. Here we love. A boy loves a girl and a girl loves, but that is frustrated. So he's using it here in context to frustrated in this material world, inebriety. Then another reference is another lecture in 1972. When we get full information of Brahman, the Supreme Brahman, Krishna, he is Anandam Chinmaya Ras Pratibhavitabi, Brahma Samhita. He's always engaged in celestial, not celestial. He's always engaged in celestial, not celestial, not sure. Spiritual bliss, Ananda Chinmaya Ras, his Leela, his Rasa Leela. He's playing with the Kavari boys, but there is no defects or the, what is called inebrieties. There's no such thing. So now he's saying defects. Now it's starting to make a little more sense to me. It's becoming more clear. Although the word inebriety refers to intoxication, and we can extract from that or extrapolate from that, intoxication means being confused, being, you lose sense of who you really are. So now it's starting to make a little more sense to me, at least in my little limited scope of understanding. But there are no defects. What is it called? Inebrieties. So now he's more or less using that in the same sense of defects, inebrieties. Not inebrieties intoxicated by alcohol. They normally say alcohol specifically, inebriated. Like my father was an alcoholic, so he was inebriated by drinking. So we are inebriated by identifying with this material body. This is how I'm seeing it. So I would also like to hear some feedback from some of you. So this material body, like, what does it say? Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani savasaha ahankar vimuratma. Ahankar vimuratma. Being bewildered by the false ego. therefore practically being intoxicated. Oh, in another place, Srila Prabhupada says, what is the need for intoxication? You take another intoxication on top of the intoxication of you thinking you're the body. That's an intoxication. It's like it's an abnormal state of perception or awareness. We're not the body, but we think we're the body. Therefore, we're intoxicated. And he would say an intoxicated man forgets who he is. You know, you've seen these people. I've always given this example, or I give this example of in Philadelphia, there's a place called Kensington. And it's probably one of the worst places in the country for intoxicated people, specifically people who take heroin, very powerful drug. And they have many documentary videos, and you see the people walking around almost like zombies and totally forgetting who they are, totally oblivious to the people around them, to the fact of where they are, totally lost. That's intoxicated. So the mundane person who's businessman, professor, good-looking people, nicely dressed people, they are intoxicated, inebriated, forgetting the fact of, you know, that their spirit's soul. So I love the how Srila Prabhupada says this. There is no defects or what is called inebrieties. So again, I'd like to hear some thoughts on that. If that word has any, do you have any further understanding of how that word is being used? Anyone would like to share a little thought?
Hare Krishna. A similar word, and it's not the same Sanskrit, but we reviewed the prayers of Queen Kunti, and she says, Janma Ishvarya Shruta Shribir Edhamana Mada Uman.
Mada.
Naivar Hatya Bidatum Vaitwam Akinchana Gochara. So the word for word meaning is given of mada, which can be mad, but it's also in that verse, the word for word is given as intoxicated by intoxication, mada, intoxicated by janma, birth, aishvarya, wealth, shruta, learning, shri, beauty, bodily beauty. They can't approach Krishna with sincere feeling. So as you mentioned, some of the symptoms of intoxication are one thing is a person who's intoxicated doesn't think they're intoxicated.
Yeah.
You know, they say, well, usually, you know, people often drive drunk.
Drunk driver.
But they think they're not. The reason they do it, one reason is because they think, oh, they're not really intoxicated. They're not. They just have a little buzz. They don't really. That's part of the idea of intoxication, that they really don't think there's a sense that they have they're more powerful, more important, more capable than they really are. So those things go along with the idea of intoxication. So, you know, we have this physical body and we think it's more permanent, more safe, more strong, infallible, and that's an intoxication. And so intoxicated not by alcohol, or it could be, or ganja, but intoxicated by, you know, the material modes of nature that infect our consciousness.
Wow. Very nicely presented, you know. Yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to process it, and you just gave me a further way to look at it. But again, that as you say, the person's intoxicated, but they don't know they're intoxicated, but they don't really realize the extent of how they're intoxicated. I remember as a young musician back in the old days, and we were driving around and intoxicated, and the person driving was really intoxicated, but we were like laughing, having fun, not realizing how dangerous that was.
Yeah.
So later on, after I got involved in the movement, especially once I surrendered and joined, I looked back on that and I thought, oh my God, Krishna saved me. I should be dead. I mean, it was serious. I mean, smoking marijuana, taking LSD and driving around like that. So then I thought, Krishna really saved me. So wonderful. And then I passed that idea on to my grandson. He's 28 years old now. But he had a very serious car accident last year, very serious. Had to put rods in his leg and scars on his head. So I was sitting with him, holding his hand. I said, Antonio, you should ask this question, because that was a serious accident. I mean, the car was practically totaled. He was in the back seat. It was an Uber driver, and he got all these scars. And the Uber driver had no scars. Nothing happened to him. It was my grandson. So I said, Antonio, you should ask yourself this question. Why did God save you? Because I'm trying to get him to expand his vision of, what God has given him, how he should use his life. Don't waste his time. Don't misuse it. I said, you should ask this question. Why did God save you? You should have died in that car. He said, wow, Grandpa, I never thought of it like that. And that's what happens in the material world. People don't think of things in the right context. So the business of the devotee is to expand their vision, remove the darkness. Remove that darkness by expanding their vision with things they never heard before. And for me, in terms of intoxication, because I was a devotee of marijuana, I was like into it so much, like a religion. It was a cultural thing for me. And I could prove it from the Bible, Genesis 29. I could use that verse and prove that marijuana was meant for us, because God says, I've given you every herb bearing seed upon the face of the earth. So I was totally, and nobody could convince me to stop. Not the threat of going to jail, not my parents. No one could convince me, because I was philosophically convinced until I read in Bhagavad Gita in the purport. I try to remember that verse is 327 or 324. I can't remember right now. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, and I'm giving this in context. I had never thought of it like that. Prabhupada expanded my understanding. He said, people try to imitate Lord Shiva by smoking ganja, but they don't. And he mentions in there, it says ganja, parentheses, marijuana. And I was shocked. How did Prabhupada know about marijuana? I was like, really? I didn't understand the context that he was in America. He saw the 60s, but in India, ganja is there. It's the same thing. So he said, by smoking ganja, imitating Lord Shiva, and this is what changed my life. They do not know they're calling death near. The moment I read that, but the fact of the matter is I had been reading Bhagavad Gita consistently, even though I was still into the culture and chanting Hare Krishna. And by the grace of Srila Prabhupada and the power of the holy name and hearing Shastra, I was able to expand my consciousness. It was really a real instance of Om Agyanatimirandasya. He removed that darkness from me. It was amazing. So even though people are intoxicated with this body, misunderstanding who they are, the opportunity for them to be elevated from that is amazing by the very nature of this Hare Krishna movement. I mean, our whole business is to wake people up, not to put them into more darkness, wake them up. Everything we do, especially in interacting with society, has to be with the knowledge that we're trying to lift them up. We're not trying to exploit people. We're not taking anything from them. Srila Prabhupada said, I came to this country, I didn't come begging anything from anyone. I came to give. And what is that giving? He prayed to Krishna, make my words suitable for their understanding. Everyone here is in ignorance and passion, forgetting you, my dear Lord, but you put them into that. You are the supreme mystic, and you can take them out. I'm praying for you to make my words suitable for their understanding. In other words, lift them up. Those devotees in the beginning, Sasrup Maharaj, Rupanuga, and Brahmananda, Gargamuni, they were all in their variety of illusions. Some of them were in the illusion of being scholars. Some of them were in the illusion of being whatever. And then Prabhupada lifted them up by his example and by his preaching. So much so that now we're able to see this picture of Bhishma and appreciate it. Whereas Srila Prabhupada points out repeatedly, mundane people cannot. They don't have the understanding, they don't have the context to appreciate this reciprocation with the Lord. So then they relegate it to being the Lord has he comes in the world, he takes a material body, and then boom. So I won't take it much further than that, but that's how I'm seeing this, is that this pastime is a challenge to the non-devotees. And if you can accept that challenge through the practice of Krishna consciousness, we can begin to appreciate. So therefore, Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Yo Vedi Tattva. Someone who can understand the Lord's appearance and activities. This is one of the Lord's major activities. You ask any Hindu about this picture, they already know. They know Mahabharata, they know this, Bhishma and Krishna. But the subtleties of that, most people don't know. That the Lord's taking pleasure in Bhishma's arrows coming at him. And it's a chivalrous relationship. They don't understand that unless they've been reading Nectar Devotion or hearing about it from an experienced devotee. So we are being prepared not to misunderstand the activities of the Lord so that we can make progress in spiritual life. We can appreciate his activities, like Arjuna's confusion in the Bhagavad Gita. We can appreciate that in context of his revelation, which happens in the later chapters, especially chapter 11, chapter 12, on and on and on. And then what it does for us, it gives us the context so that we can now start to implement these kinds of things into our lives, not to imitate. We don't want to try to imitate Bhishma. The aspect of Bhishma's relationship to Krishna we want is that bhajitam priti, that loving exchange. Like Srila Prabhupada says, Kamsa was thinking of Krishna, constantly sleeping, waking, could not stop thinking of Krishna, but thinking how to kill him. Ravana, he's thinking how to kill Rama. What are we thinking when we perform our devotional service? So Bhishma is giving us an amazing way to focus all of our activities, whatever they might be, for the pleasure of Krishna. That's the essence. So I'll stop there. Hopefully there are a few questions or comments. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Vishnu Gada, for helping me on that. Anyone?
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for a wonderful class. And I have to say that I missed 99% of it. I had to deal with some stuff with work that I had a hunch was going to happen this morning.
No problem. No problem.
But I have to play the class back because I really, really want to hear it. I'll have Vishnugada Prabhu ask his question. Please go ahead, Vishnugada Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. So there's, in the first paragraph, Srila Prabhupada says that Bhishma Dev is in a relationship with Lord Krishna as a servant. And later he says he's in relation to Lord Krishna in the rasa of chivalry. So is it one or the other? Could you comment?
It's hard to comment on that without going all the way into the Nectar Devotion. I just kind of finished reading the Nectar Devotion. So that point of chivalry in Dasya, is that a combination? Is that an aspect of, or is that available in the Dasya? Because it says Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. So in the Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami really explains in great detail the different attributes of Dasya. I can't think of it all right now, but I understand your point, whether chivalry is synonymous with Dasya, or is it available within the Dasya relationship? Is that part of what you're saying, Vishnugada Prabhu?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into. I don't have a direct quote. I just know from just reading Nectar Devotion that all those relationships are extensively explained, and I would like to see if that chivalry is part of Dasya.
My understanding is that these are the 5 primary rasas, and that within those rasas, these other aspects can come out, but they're not the primary. There's secondary, like, and there are many examples given of each kind of secondary rasa, but they're with devotees that have already a primary rasa. But then there's this secondary rasa comes out. It's not like they're
primary,
always there.
Yeah.
Whereas the Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya is always there.
And then there's this mixing of rasas, and then the warning to avoid rasabasa.
Yeah.
Mixing the rasas, without, I don't want to say without understanding. Yeah, maybe without understanding, mixing the rasas. Like we use that term loosely in Krishna consciousness, rasabasa. But it's actually very scientific, the mixing of the rasas. So Vishnugada was pointing out the primary rasa, and then these other aspects of that primary rasa. So in looking at friendship, so you got dasya, servitorship, sakya. So within the context of friendship and the chivalry, it's actually there. I had some references to that. Yeah.
Sure. When
The cowherd boys.
the cowherd boys want to wrestle with Krishna. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So they're in a friendly, loving relationship, but they want to wrestle, have fun with Krishna. So you're right. There's the primary and then our secondary auxiliary aspects of those rasas. But again, that's nectar devotion. And we should all be reading that. It's such an important book. It's so many wonderful details. Thank you so much, Vishnu. Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Prabhu, can you comment or shed some light more on this rasa basa lingo? in the sense that how, and it's true because I've used that term, we've used that term, and we know that there are 5 primary rasas, and then there's like a quote unquote like a subheading, if that's the right word to use. But at the same time, we mix it up, and sometimes we are not aware, and we're not because we don't understand. How can we be aware that it's rasa basa?
Well, how can we be aware? Dadami Buddha Yogam, we perform devotional service with love and devotion, tesam but satata yuktanam, bhajitam priti purvakam, Dadami Buddha Yogam. So that Dadami Buddha Yogam, Krishna gives us the understanding to really appreciate and to put things in the proper context. So in order to be able to recognize our shortcomings, we have to be steeped in sincere devotional service. Like Srila Prabhupada says, a nice phrase, first you deserve and then you desire, meaning first you do the work necessary. If you want the results to be able to desire things and do things in this world, you have to deserve it by devotional service. So that verse, Tesam Satata Yuktanam, is the deserved part. You do the proper service. You focus on service. You focus on chanting. You focus on reading. And then the intelligence, how to discern, because intelligence means the ability to discriminate. So what you're describing is how can I see these things properly? How can I recognize rasa basa? How can I recognize when I'm doing it? Because we use that term in ISKCON. Well, focus on service. Focus on the purity of your service. And then leave the rest to Krishna. He will give the understanding how to put these things into perspective. Intellectually, we try to adjust everything, generally speaking, because that's what we're accustomed to. But the subtlety is Krishna, they call it the aha moment in the mundane terminology. Aha, now I understand. Back in the hippie days, it was aha based on LSD. Oh, wow, now I understand. I'm God, But in Krishna consciousness, you do devotional service and you go, wow, now I understand that's rasa basa. So some examples of rasa basa. Vishnu, I'm sure you have some examples from your old New York days, back in the days of what would be rasa basa.
That was my next question. Please, if you can share some examples.
I mean, I would comment that the best way, along with what Balabhadra Prabhu was mentioning, of learning to understand things from with praying to Krishna, is just to keep strictly in line with the previous acharyas. Like what Srila Prabhupada taught, so really, is this how Srila Prabhupada did things? Is this how, and when you look at what Srila Prabhupada did, and you read about what we were reading yesterday about what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada did, and it's straight in line. It's not, he didn't deviate an inch. And so that's a safe way to avoid a rasa basa. There's a really good discussion in the book by Bhakti Vikas Swami called Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava, because when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda Thakur were living in Puri, there was a temple just nearby where they were. Near they had the Gaudiya Math there also, but there was a temple nearby, and their thing was to chant Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Hare Krishna Hare Ram Radhe Govinda. And the person who came up with that mantra, he was a very famous Babaji
Mm.
They had many followers, and they had many, and but Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur spoke to him and said, "This is not. This is a made-up mantra, and it's rasabas." Why is that? Because it's equating Radhe Govinda, Radha and Krishna, with Nitai Gaur. So Radha Krishna, that's a different mood, a different experience of devotional service than Nitai Gaur. They're servants of the Supreme Lord. So they're Krishna and Balaram, but in the mood of service. Not whereas Krishna is the enjoyer, the supreme enjoyer. So he called that. He said it's rasabas. So somebody else would say, "Well, come on, what's the big deal? They're names of God. What's the big deal? Why should you make a big deal about it?" But no, he was very, very, very. He called it a dagaral mantra, and sometimes the people from that temple would come specifically by the Gaudiya Mutt just to sing that mantra, and he would have Bhaktisiddhanta would have his people come out, his disciples go out and bang gong so people wouldn't hear that mantra. And then he said, sampradaya vihinaye mantrasne nishpalamata. Where did this mantra come from? It's not coming in the sampradaya. It's not mentioned in the shastras. But the key thing he was concerned with was the mixing of the rasas, or rasabas, improper mixing of rasas. We're talking here where there's a mixed rasa between servitorship and chivalry, but this was for Bhishma Dev, but in this case it was improper.
Wow, that's very, very enlightening. I just saw something because I looked up rasabas in the database, and this is a very interesting example that showed up several times. He says, Prabhupada says, "It is not that because there is no stock, we can do whimsically as we like and lose the idea. That is rasabasa. Because there is no bread, you take stone to eat. There is no stock of bread, so you will take stone." He calls that rasabasa, mixing it up. So Vishnu Gada's point that we should stick strictly to the line, and then we can protect ourselves from the tendency to mix things in Krishna consciousness. Especially kirtan is like one of those situations where we learn so many things. We heard it from somewhere. We heard it from here, Gaudiya Mutt, this. And nowadays, there's everyone doing kirtan outside of ISKCON. So devotees, in order to accommodate those people, sometimes try to sing like them or even use some of the things they sing, prayers, things to Lord Shiva. They do a lot of Ganesh things and Lord Shiva things, and even, Durga. They say all these different mantras, and sometimes trying to accommodate them or attract them. We get into that with them. I think we have to be very, very careful with that. We are followers of Lord Chaitanya. We are Vaishnavas. We're not Hindus. We're Vaishnavas. I asked this question to myself, and I'm going to ask it to my sister, who's a Jehovah's Witness, in context of this. What language do they speak in heaven? I'm not asking all of you. I'm going to ask this to the Christian people. What language do they speak in heaven? So I looked it up in Google, and one person said, what is the language of Judaism? Hebrew.
Hebrew.
They speak Hebrew in heaven. I went, yeah, right. Do they speak? So someone asked the question, do they speak English? They speak this, they speak that. So in the spiritual world, how they function in the spiritual world is beyond our understanding. Do we understand that exactly what's happening in the spiritual world? So when we're talking about rasa basa, the safest thing we can do is just follow the conclusion of the acharyas and not speculate based on what we've heard from some other sampradaya and this and that, mixing all these things together. It's just be very, very careful. I mean, that's the main point, to be very careful.
Prabhu, can I ask one more question? Because now that, and the two examples that Vishnugada Prabhu shared was just amazing, because
you're really good.
I've heard that mantra changed, and the last three lines, the third and fourth, I'm like, oh, okay, anyway. And then I've heard the kirtan part, but can you give an example, Prabhu? And the reason I'm asking is I just want to be very clear in my mind, An example of rasa basa when it comes to deity worship or temple standards, temple procedure.
There's so many. I think there's so many examples. I have one personal example, and it was not an intentional rasa basa, but luckily I was corrected by His Holiness Jai Bhattacharya. When our deities Shishi Gorni Tai, which were the primary deities of Atlanta, when Srila Prabhupada came to Atlanta, the only deity was Shishi Gorni Tai. So the day of the installation, I remember it like yesterday, how we dressed the deities. I mean, I was not a Brahmin at the time. So they dressed the deities like sannyasis. You know, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. Our Gorni Tai deities are really big brass deities. So in the hands of the deities, they put kartals. So I remember that they had kartals in Lord Chaitanya's hands, kartals in Nityananda's hand. And they had saffron, like sannyasis. So I was describing that to to Jai Bhattacharya Maharaj. He was our GBC. And I said, you know, I'd like to be able to do that again, you know, dressing, because the deities, you know how grand we dress the deities with flower garlands and beautiful jewelry. But when we installed Gorni Tai, it was like sannyasis, because that's how Balabhadra, our temple president, wanted to do it. So I wanted to do that again. And Jai Bhattacharya Maharaj said, why would you do that? Why would you put Lord Chaitanya in that mood? That was a very sad mood, the rasa. He said, you understand how much pain that caused, his mother and all the devotees. He cut his hair, and it's like saying, take off the wigs, Lord Chaitanya with the bald head on the altar. So I was thinking how wonderful that would be to do that again. I wanted to experience that again. And Maharaj said, no, cannot do that. The deity should have all opulence. Prabhupada said the deities are being worshipped, especially Radha Krishna, in a grand way, like Vaikuntha. This is not... It's not like Krishna in Vrindavan. He's wearing a little yellow dhoti and little top and just little flower. No, grand like that. So we won't misunderstand who they are. So for me, that was an experience of quote unquote rasa basa. The rasa of him being a sannyasi mixed with him being in the form that we worship him on the altar. That's an example that I think is just kind of pertinent. It was personal to me. Rishugra?
There's quite a controversy about some things on the worship of Lord Chaitanya, because some people say that he's supposed to be worshipped as a devotee, and some say that he's supposed to be worshipped as a Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's a controversy about peacock feather.
Yeah.
Peacock feather on Lord Chaitanya's, we put a peacock feather because as a devotee, why would he wear a peacock feather, right? And so there's a very good discussion of that question by Janani Vas. I don't know how I got it, but he addresses that question very specifically, and because apparently the Gaudiya Math, they don't put a peacock feather on Lord Chaitanya. So. But Srila Prabhupada, he quoted various, times when Srila Prabhupada said, yes, it's okay to have the peacock feather there. So then Janani Vas asked the people who were objecting from the Gaudiya Math, he said, well, on Ekadashi, what do you offer to Lord Chaitanya? So they said, well, we offer, rice, dal, everything. So that if you're doing it as Lord, you're worshiping Lord Chaitanya as a devotee, you would give him a Kadashi Prasad, isn't it? So it's not, he said it, he pointed out that it's not consistent. And so generally, Srila Prabhupada gave instruction to worship Lord Chaitanya, as you're saying, in great awe and reverence as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as you mentioned, Jai Bhattacharya Maharaj gave direction, not as a sannyasi.
Yeah, and it was very heavy. I mean, he was like almost like upset. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to put him into that mood? I was taken aback, like, wow. But it was very serious. So yes, and one time a devotee in Atlanta, wonderful devotee, but he wanted to dress Krishna, our beautiful Radha Madan Mohan, He wanted to do it, and let me describe it to you. You know how Krishna has his nice dhoti, comes down generally below his knees, sometimes a little bit close to the knees. He brought it all the way up to the, excuse the expression, crotch, you know, that area, all the way up. And I was temple president, and I went berserk. What are you doing? Oh, but in Vrindavan it's very hot, so we want Krishna to be cool. And I said, Prabhu, he's almost naked. You can't do that. It was in my heart, it was a total rasabasa. So I was like furious. So from that day on, he never did that again. But that was, and everybody was looking like, wow. So even now, like on Radhastami, is that this controversy about should you show Radharani's feet or not show Radharani's feet? And from what I understand, you're not supposed to show her feet anytime. Vishnugara, can you?
There's a article on dandavats.com from the deity worship ministry that goes into that in detail. And the conclusion is, as you said, they're not supposed to. I know in Philadelphia for quite a while, it was only on Radhashtami they would do it.
Mhm.
But so that was part of the controversy. But their conclusion was no. Prabhupada said no.
Yeah. I mean, Atlanta, the same thing. It went on for many years. I never did it myself, but it just went on for many years. And I just like, I couldn't look at Radharani. I mean, I just feel embarrassed to look at her feet. That's why I don't like to dress the deities. Like, how can I touch Radharani? I'm not pure enough to touch Radharani. I never have dressed Radha and Krishna. I just feel like, I can't do it, you know? And looking at her feet, she's such a sweet lady, so beautiful, so pure. I want to see, anyway, I don't want to go down that road too much. So that is conclusive that no, don't show her feet. That's not good.
And as you mentioned also, I mean, there's several times that Prabhupada said we're not worshiping Radha Krishna in the mood of Vrindavan.
Yes.
But in the mood of, Lakshmi Narayan Puja, in our condition, we're not at the Vrindavan means spontaneous love.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but we're not at that stage. We worship in Lakshmi Narayan. So sometimes you'll find, there's Vrindavan backdrops and all that stuff. One might be a little careful in that way because that's explained a little bit more in Mother Jamuna's biography, because she had a lot of involvement with deity worship, whereas Satsvarup Maharaj, I mean, he's a very developed, nice devotee, and but I doubt that he had much involvement with deity worship.
Mm-hmm.
Do you follow?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, but Mother Jamuna, she was really taking care of. She took care of the first large Radha Krishna deities and Radha Landanishwara. So she had a lot of instruction from Srila Prabhupada on those issues. And apparently, according to some advertisement I got, there's a book that was recently published, printed, that has all her deity worship instructions given to her. I don't have that book, but I heard that it's there.
If you find it, let me know, because I'd love to have that. Parikshit Prabhu. Haribo.
Hare Krishna, I accept the humble obeisances. So through the discussion and the rule that we don't expose Srimati Radharani's feet, I've seen there are paintings of Radha Krishna. The artists,
Mm-hmm.
some of the paintings, Krishna's feet is exposed, Radha's feet are exposed. So what should we make of that? I'm trying to get an understanding of these pictures.
Well, you put me on the spot with that one.
No, and Vishnugara Prabhu also. Both of you are discussing, so I'm just
I know. It's a good observation. That's an astute observation that, yes, you see some paintings in Radharani's feet and the Gopis' feet and Krishna's feet.
Yeah.
There's deity worship, and then there's artistic interpretation.
Mm.
So what we're specifically so far discussing is the deity worship aspect of it. Now, the artist, in the beginning, Srila Prabhupada personally guided them. So you can look at some of those original paintings, like Jadharani and Parikshit Prabhu. Parikshit, yeah, but another Parikshit, right? All those beautiful. So we can look at those and get some guidance. And I'll do that today. I'm going to actually, because I hadn't thought about that. You pointed out something really, really very important and very interesting. the paintings and then the deity worship, how Radharani is exposed, you know. But there's also another side of it, which is, as Vishnu just pointed out, we're worshiping like Lakshmi Narayan, great opulence. So a particular devotee has been describing how, and this is how that person described it, what respectful woman would wear that much jewelry in public? In other words, you don't need to put all this jewelry on the deities, because a respectful lady would not at all expose herself like that. And I, along with some other devotees, are like, it was very uncomfortable to hear that, because we're so accustomed to making it so beautiful, the decorations and the swirling, you know, dresses. And he said, no, you don't need to do that, because no respectful lady. It's almost like bringing Radharani to be like a lady, just a normal lady in the material world. And, you know, not to be offensive, but that is some aspect of Rasabhasa to some degree, you know, that idea. Because like, as Vishnu pointed out, Srila Prabhupada wanted us to worship the deities in the form of Lakshmi Narayan. Why? If we're offering all the opulence to the deity, then we can realize how insignificant we are. We see how grand they are. But if we bring them down to our level, who knows what our minds would be, how we would be in this movement. So, yeah, thank you, Preksha. That's a great observation. I'll look into that. I'll look at some paintings today and see how many times I see Radharani's feet. Okay, Anasuya, anything else?
No, Prabhu, I was just going to say that I think I have some questions that I would like to email you and Vishnugoda Prabhu.
Okay, please.
About clarification, you know, about deity worship, because Vishnugoda Prabhu made a really nice point about backdrops. And so I just want to be on the same page, so I don't get smacked by the Lord, by Lord Chaitanya. So
well, no, it's like just recently, I'm not going to ask Mother Gita to speak because she's not feeling very well, but recently we were discussing something about the worship of Vrinda Devi. And she asked me very nicely about that. And then what I did was I said, let me ask the deity minister. So I wrote to Jayananda Prabhu, took a few days, he wrote back and gave a very nice explanation about it. So Gita and myself feel very confident the way in which she's situated, Vrinda Devi, is according to the standard, as Vishnu Kadar said, we stay in the line. If we're not sure, ask a question. If you just do something, like if I come to your home and I see your altar and it's like, whoopity-doo, and you go, and I kind of go, So I went to one devotee's house and they had Guru Nanak on the altar and they were trying to follow Srila Prabhupada. No, I didn't attack Guru Nanak. Prabhupada said Guru Nanak is a Vaishnava. So that's what I explained to him. But I said, if you want to be according to the standard, you would not do like that because that's not in the temple. But no disrespect to Guru Nanak, but that's not the right way to do it. Another devotee he was in the beginning of his devotional service, had this big closet and the deities were in the closet. He had Krishna and Chaitanya and Durga and Shiva and every demigod you can imagine in that closet. And I used to go to their house. I didn't say anything. I take the nice prasadam from Mataji, such wonderful prasad. And then one day, after he's been chanting so many years, 16, he realized, he said, Balabhadra Prabhu, is this correct? Should I do like that? I said, Prabhu, if you're asking me, I have to say, no, it's not correct. So he changed that. And to this day, even though he's passed away from the world, his family still maintains the perfect deity worship according to the Atlanta temple standards, because he asked the question, should I be doing like this? But only after he had been chanting. My encouragement to him was chant Hare Krishna, come to the temple, take prasad, follow the process. And then Krishna revealed to him to ask me that question at the right time. Should I be doing that? Prabhu, no, you should not. So yes, the secret is stay in the line. Now, I don't call myself a spiritual master. I'm sure no one on this call is saying I'm a spiritual master. But that verse, Tadvidi pranipatena pari prashnena sevaya upatek shantite ganam ganinas tatik. Try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. So, spiritual master, we're all trying to be, in a sense, spiritual masters, following the example of the spiritual master, just giving the instruction. So we're giving Prabhupada's instruction. So they can ask us questions, and hopefully we can give the proper answer. That's how you learn the truth. Don't speculate. Don't just like, well, I think this is good. I think this is right. No, ask a devotee, a more experienced devotee. You should have at least 4 or 5 devotees you can consult with. Like I consult with Vishnu Gadar, he consults with me back and forth all the time on different issues. And on Anasuya, you're always doing the same. Pariksha, we're always doing the same. Gita, we're always doing the same. And we've been around for so many years, decades. We still do it. Last thing, this devotee that I'm studying under right now, he said, a brahmana, a teacher, is always learning. Always. That is a sign of a real Brahmana. Never thinks I already know. Always asking questions, always learning. Srila Prabhupada himself was always reading and studying and listening and absorbing so many wonderful things. Even Krishna himself doesn't understand himself 100%. It keeps expanding, learning new things about himself. Just like you might say, I learned this new thing about myself today. You think Krishna doesn't have that pleasure? Every day, something new, fresh. So always inquire if you're not sure. So I'm going to inquire now. Anasu, you want me to stop?
If you don't mind, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm as hungry as everybody else. Okay.
I will definitely send an email because I do have a few questions. So I'll write to you and Vishnu Gada Prabhu just to make sure that in my service, I'm, that what I'm doing is right, because if I want to make sure. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you to all the devotees for a wonderful class. And I have to play your class because I missed a good part because of my office calls. But thank you so much, Prabhu. And thank you to Vishwagada Prabhu for always adding more and shedding light.
Wonderful.
I really appreciate whenever Prabhu gets on your classes and adds light. It's so, so, so nice. And thank you to all the devotees for joining us. Vanchakaptivyascha, Kripasindavevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
See you tomorrow for happy hour.
And I will text you the verse, Prabhu.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother Gita. Hare Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Savior.